Now back to the historic hush money trial verdict in New York. A jury there found former President Donald Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts of falsifying business records.
Fox 5 has team coverage of that verdict tonight. We start with Russ Spencer live in studio with more about what happened inside and outside the courtroom. Russ.
Well, Christine and Tom, Donald Trump is the first former president ever to be convicted of felony crimes. A New York jury found him guilty of falsifying business records in a scheme to influence the 2016 election by making hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. Jurors deliberated for 9.5 hours over 2 days before convicting him of all 34 felony counts against him. Earlier today, they asked to have testimony reread from former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen and National Enquirer publisher David Pecker. Each of the felonies carries a potential sentence of up to 4 years in prison, but Class E felonies rarely involve jail time for first offenders. But the judge could take into account the former president's lack of remorse in this case. Mr. Trump sat stone-faced, says the verdict was read, but he had a lot to say to reporters as he walked out of the courtroom.
This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline.
And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law and doing so without fear or favor.
Now, the former president is expected to appeal the verdict quickly and return to the campaign trail as a convicted felon, sentencing set for July 11th, just days before the Republican National Convention. Christine?
All right, Russ, thanks so much. And the former president faces 3 other felony indictments, although the New York case may be the only one to reach a conclusion before the November election. In Florida, the former president is charged with 40 counts stemming from his alleged mishandling of sensitive government records after leaving the White House. The 2 other cases are local charges here in Atlanta and federal charges in Washington, D.C. that he conspired to undo the 2020 election results.
And speaking of the Fulton County case, what does this guilty verdict mean for that case and Trump's run for the White House?
Fox 5's Christopher King speaks with legal experts. He continues our team coverage at the live desk tonight. Christopher, what did they say?
Oh, Christine, Tom, they say we are in uncharted waters. Can a convicted felon serve as president? Will this guilty verdict make it easier or harder for the election interference case to move forward here in Georgia? Take a listen.
This is the first major party candidate convicted of a felony during a campaign.
Former President Donald Trump, now convicted felon Donald Trump. He is the first former commander-in-chief ever found guilty of felony crimes.
This is almost without precedent. And in many ways is unprecedented.
John Acevedo is a visiting associate professor at Emory University School of Law.
Is he legally allowed to hold office?
He is legally allowed to hold office. What is unclear is what would happen to the sentence imposed by the state of New York. It's usually been theorized that it would be suspended and that he would resume the punishment after he left office.
We asked him, what will the conviction mean for the election interference case here in Fulton County?
Will this guilty verdict have any impact on the Georgia case?
Directly, no. Prosecutors aren't allowed to raise past criminal convictions unless the defendant takes the stand or the defense in some other way raises the issue.
It won't have any legal impact, but I think we'll have some energy impact. I think it will re-energize the DA's office in Fulton County to try to proceed as quickly as they can.
Darrell Cohen is a former assistant district attorney in Fulton County. He says the conviction could smooth the path for the case.
Once there's a jury impaneled, the 12 men and women on that jury will be more energetic. They'll be less worried about whatever the public may have to say about it, good or bad. I think they'll be able to do what they think they should do and serve constitutionally and do what is right in terms of the United States.
Right now, the Georgia case is in the appeals court. A judge will eventually decide whether DA Fani Willis will remain on that case. At the live desk, Christopher King, Fox 5 News.
All right, we'll see, Christopher. Thanks. Of course, reaction continues from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle tonight. Governor Brian Kemp saying that the trial was motivated by partisan politics, saying in part, quote, despite today's events, the ultimate verdict is up to the American people on November the 5th, when they will have a clear choice on the future of our country. Meanwhile, Senator Raphael Warnock simply saying no one is above the law, including Donald Trump.
Tense moments in and around the New York City courtroom today as that verdict was read.
The former president said to be looking down as the verdict on those 34 counts was read. Let's get up to Fox's Connor Hansen, who was there as all of this was unfolding. Connor, tell us what the mood was like in New York City when that verdict came out.
Tom, it's quiet right now behind me, but right after we heard that guilty verdict on all 34 counts, we saw people streaming out onto the sidewalks outside the courthouse. It was a raucous scene. A lot of people celebrating the verdict, chanting, holding up signs, but there were also protesters, people supporting former President Trump. A lot of them have been here outside the courthouse all 6 weeks of that trial. But that loud scene outside was a stark contrast from the moments inside the courtroom as people waited to hear the verdict. People weren't really expecting to get a verdict today. Less than 2 full days of deliberation for that jury, asking several questions and follow-up questions about some of the testimony they heard and jury instructions. Both sides had to sit quietly for about 30 minutes before they could hear that verdict. Obviously, there's been lots of reaction. Former President Trump railing against it, but many, like President Joe Biden, celebrating it, even trying to raise money on it. Former President Trump also at a fundraiser tonight.
Connor, first-time offenders, though, rarely go to prison for Class E felonies like this. So what kind of sentence could the former president be looking at?
Well, it could be quite a range. We'll have that sentencing on July 11th, and exactly what it is will be up to Judge Juan Merchan. But technically, that could be anything from something like probation all the way up to several years of prison time. But as you mentioned, that prison time highly unlikely, not only for a first-time offender, but especially not for a former president who's running again for president. Just the logistics alone of that, I can't even begin to imagine.
Man, it'll be interesting to see what the fallout will be. Connor Hansen live for us in New York, where this all unfolded today. Connor, thanks.